Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Welcome to the Mysterious Matters Podcast, and I am your curator of mysteries. My name is Bob Bain, and joining us this evening, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be Peter Ward, and we are going to be having a conversation this evening about the price of immortality and the race to live forever. And we all have our natural expiration dates. I have my natural expiration date. Peter has his natural expiration date, and you... well, you also have your natural expiration date. We don't know what those are. Most of us do not know when we are going to naturally expire. We just don't. But what if you could artificially extend that expiration date? What if you could artificially extend your life for an extra 10 years, an extra 20, an extra 50 years, maybe an extra 100, 200, 300. Once we get to that point where we can artificially extend our lives, our years, are there truly any limitations? Well, we are going to be discussing the past, the present, and the future, the successes and the failures, to try and preserve life. Sometimes it is life after it has died. But how can you preserve life after you have died? Even if death had just occurred and 5 minutes later you preserve the body in ice. The body's dead, right? Well, we are going, like I said, our guest this evening is Peter Ward. And Peter is joining us from England. Your book is The Price of Immortality and the Race to Live Forever. Let's talk about the race to live longer. When did it begin?
So obviously the race to, people wanted to be immortal for so long. I think people have always wanted to live a little longer. I think that's just the nature of medicine, is to make people live longer. Obviously life expectancy has risen over time. A lot of that is due to sort of eliminating infant deaths. But I think there's always been this kind of movement of extended life. There's been iterations of it in the sort of 60s, which were more sort of almost like hippie movements. They were more spiritual. And then as it's gone along since then, it's sort of more science has been introduced, I think. So it's gradually got more serious. And now we see that there's a lot of sort of well-known sort of research, as well-funded research is done into anti-aging. Not all of it necessarily to make us live longer, but definitely to make us live healthier for longer. So it's been a gradual thing, whereas in the past it used to be a sort of any product that you saw out there claimed to make you live longer. If it didn't come from a doctor and you didn't have a disease and it wasn't going to cure that disease, was a scam. Absolutely. Now the sort of lines have been blurred a little bit. So there is promising research out there. And there are claims that, there are some supplements that will help you live a little bit longer and improve your longevity. It's definitely harder to disprove those than it was. And there's definitely more hope for people that do want to live longer.
And one of those supplements, it is called lion mane or lion's mane. It is actually a mushroom, which supposedly will help a person grow more cells in their brain.
Yeah, I think that's one of the ones that I've heard about. There's so many of them. The thing is that it's hard to really verify in terms of what is promising research and what isn't. The hardest thing for a scientist to do is to prove that it makes someone live longer, because really, to really prove it, then you'd have to run a test that would last a human's lifespan. And then you'd have to prove that it was that lion's mane that made them live longer or made the cells in the brain healthier for longer, and not any one of other thousands of things that they just do normally in their life. So it's really difficult. And that's the problem, I think, in this field, is that a lot of it is just sort of doing as much. If you're really interested in doing this, and if you're really serious about trying to live longer or sort of regenerate the health of your body, then you have to do a lot of research. But then you do at some point just have to say, I'm going to put my faith in this one, and I'm going to try it, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to hope with all my heart that it does actually work.
Yes. At the beginning of this show, I mentioned to the audience that I have a natural expiration date. You have one, they have one, and that it is coming to the point now where it looks like we might actually be able to artificially extend that date, our expiration, because they are genetically enhancing the human cells, correct?
Yeah. So it has been done. It's kind of a murky area in terms of like regulation of what you can and can't do. So people are using CRISPR and gene editing to definitely to change cells in other species. It has been done by someone in China. That was very controversial. The guy got arrested, but it did seem to work, I think, from what I've read. I think if you had no limitations in terms of regulations and ethics, you could probably see this technology brought in quite quickly to address disease, certainly. So the question is amongst the sort of aging researchers is there a max life for a human? Is there a maximum? So a lot of aging researchers say around 120, you're going to die no matter what. Something's going to get you around 120. You're not going to live longer than 120 because there is so much programmed within us for us not to live any longer than that something's going to get you at that point. So theoretically, you could change your genes. A lot of how old we live for is down to our genes. Like you see these people that live to 110, and they say, I've been smoking all my life. I eat a cheeseburger a day or whatever. And that's because their genes are just set up so they will live that long. They're very good at defending the body against cancer. Their body is just very cancer resistant and heart disease resistant. So theoretically, you could change. It would never be as easy, though, as flipping a switch. I think that's the key point here. So you could change one lot of genes and then something else would go in the body. You could flip a switch and make us live a little bit longer, but what would you, in terms of like your kidney could regenerate or your cells would be cancer resistant, but you don't know what that would do to you in a different way.
How did you get involved, or what made you interested in researching the immortalist movement?
Yeah, so my first book was about space and the privatization of space. During my research for that book, I spoke to a lot of people who were interested in space and going out into the universe and living on other planets. And obviously, that always brings about the question of how do you travel a decent distance in space without dying along the way? Because if you want to go out the solar system, it's going to take you a huge number of years. So there's this crossover between sort of living longer in space, I think, naturally from that. So a few people sort of mentioned it, and I got really interested in the topic. And so I did a bit of digging into it, and I found the Church of Perpetual Life in Florida. And so I went down there just to go and check it out and see what they were talking about, whether it was with a healthy dose of skepticism, I should add, as I went down there, which I think is a natural thing for everyone when they first encounter this topic. It's, it sounds crazy. So I was down in Florida and there was a possum just dead outside my Airbnb. And actually I woke up one morning, the first morning, and it was, there was two of the local people that lived on the street were yelling at each other over who was going to get rid of this possum corpse. So I leave the Airbnb and look down and see this dead possum, and it was sort of this weird sort of hint of this element of irony in the whole trip, that I'd be seeing this dead body every morning as I left the Airbnb and then going off.
Every morning you were seeing that body. For how long?
Oh, I was only there for a few days. But yeah, I just saw this possum gradually sort of decomposing, and every day I'd be going to go talk to these people who were saying we can live forever, and every day I was sort of coming back and seeing this possum saying, it was almost like nature was telling me
it ain't gonna happen.
Had other ideas.
Now, let's go to, what was his name? I'm looking at my notes. Was it Bob or Robert Nelson? Which one did he go by?
He went by Bob, I think, Bob Nelson.
Okay. As I was reading about Bob, he was a television repairman. I had looked on the internet about him, what other people were saying. And as I read about this individual, he really reminded me more of a P.T. Barnum type of person. He had the ideas, but he didn't necessarily have the technological means. He had the ideas to do things. He had the ability to, I guess, make people give him money. He could scam people out of it. But when it came right down to it, he was not the scientific type of person to pull this off. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's a really good summary of Bob Nelson. Essentially, he had the enthusiasm, and he knew what he wanted to do, and he was inspired by the work of others. He wanted to freeze a person so that they could be reanimated in the future. And so there was a guy called Robert Ettinger who wrote a book which became sort of the Bible of cryonics, which is the process of freezing people. And so when he read Ettinger's book, it was sort of a real wake-up moment for him. He was kind of drifting around. He didn't seem to have much going on. He had a tough upbringing, and then he was in LA. It seemed to be in a bit of a going nowhere situation. And so he attended this meeting of cryonics enthusiasts. He went in there expecting, everyone to be wearing lab coats and everyone to be talking about very scientific things which would go above his head. But by the second meeting, he'd been elected the leader of this cryonics group. So he obviously had this sort of charm, I think, and he had a way of talking to people that we're going to get this done. He was very practical. He didn't just want to talk about things. He wanted to get them done. And to be fair, he did. He froze the first person who's still frozen today. He did get some things done, but then he had a sort of fall from grace when he essentially ran out of money and the bodies that he was keeping cold defrosted.
That was something that really bothered me. I'm sure it bothered a lot of people. It probably bothered you as when you found this out, that he just allowed bodies, his clients, sometimes even his friends, to thaw out, and he took them places to just decompose. He said, goodbye.
Yeah.
I can't do anything to help you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think so. There's two versions of history. Obviously, there's one by him. He wrote his own autobiography, in which I think wasn't entirely truthful, and definitely was written to put himself in a good light, which is probably what we'd all do with our autobiographies, to be fair. Some within the industry, though, sort of see him as this kind of, within the cryonics industry, see him as this sort of sad figure who wanted to do things, but, things went against him. But others saw him as this very sort of shady character who was actually quite malicious, was just taking the money. And as soon as the money ran out, he just left these people to defrost. And that was the equivalent of killing them, because he believed, and so did everyone who had been frozen, believed that they would be reanimated. They didn't think they'd reached, they were dead. They thought they would come back to life. So by letting them decompose, it was almost like he was killing them all over again.
Yes. Do you know what the science is for cryonics, I guess it is? The science behind cryonics, because certain people like Michio Kaku has come out, spoken out against it, said there is no scientific basis at this particular stage where we can freeze somebody and for it not to just completely destroy the cells, that there's no way to reanimate them at that point because you're just killing everything.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. There is no evidence to suggest that there would be anything there to reanimate in the future. And that's based on the technology which we have now. So what the cryonicists will contend is that they say that the technology of the future will be able to overcome the problems that we have now. So they'll be able to take the bodies as they are, and they will be able to bring them back to life. So it is a leap of faith. It's again, there's some science to freezing body and preserving it, but to actually believe that it can be brought back to life, that requires a big leap of faith. And to be fair to people in cryonics, they sort of acknowledge this. They don't sort of shy away from it. They say, we're not saying this is definitely going to work. We're saying there's a small chance of this working. But wouldn't you rather have a tiny chance of being reanimated and living in the future rather than having absolute zero by being buried or cremated? That's their sales pitch, and that's kind of fair enough, really. They're not promising reanimation. All they're promising is that they'll store your body as long as they can until someone can possibly reanimate it.
I just pulled up an article from New Scientist. It was posted November the 20th of 2019, and it said humans were placed in suspended animation for the first time. This happened at the University of Maryland School of Medicine. Suspended animation for people who otherwise they would have lost, as in if they were to operate, they could not operate on the person as they were unless they completely put them in a state of suspended animation, such as, gunshot wounds, cardiac arrest, anything that could have just killed them, just like that. They put them under for the first time ever in 2019 and brought them back. There are ways that we could do that.
Yeah, I think the key thing is the time, how long you're going to keep them, essentially. So there is a particular type of surgery where they'll stop your heart and effectively you're dead, and then they'll do what they need to do and then restart it again. And so technically you've died and come back to life. I think the problem is it gets bringing people back to life or even storing them gets harder the longer they are dead.
Yes.
So that, I think, is the key thing here. If you want to keep a body for 100 years, then that's going to be extremely tough. And also, you really need to get to people, ideally, before they died or straight after they've died. That's a key thing with cryonics, like the preservation of obviously our brains don't cope well without oxygen, but they cope better without oxygen if they're down at very low temperatures. So essentially, the central premise is that you need to get the brain really cold, really fast, as soon as someone dies. But if there's a lot of ways to die. Unfortunately, you're not always near someone that's going to be able to put your head in ice or get you to the people to do the procedure as fast as possible. So yeah, it's a tricky one.
It is. And what they were doing, I just had to take a look at this again. It goes to cryonics to a degree. They were cooling a person to around 10 degrees to 15 degrees Celsius by replacing all of their blood with ice cold saline.
Yeah. So that's sort of similar to cryonics. They do take out your blood, and they replace it with a sort of, it's almost like a biological antifreeze solution. Because when you bring the temperatures of a body down rapidly or at all, then the cells might be damaged. So this is essentially to stop them. Essentially, you want the freezing to be inside the cells, not outside. It's a very tricky procedure, and I'd like to read the article, but I imagine it was done for a very short amount of time. Then they were brought back to life. There are also some cases of people that have fallen into lakes, frozen lakes, and died, and have been brought back to life.
Yes.
Way after they should have done. There is some definitely examples out there. It's just whether you can do it for as long as the cryonicists say that you can keep them.
Now, one of the biggest problems I have with the cryonics, from what I've been reading at the very least, is that they are taking people within minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is, after they died. Can we reanimate? Can we bring someone back from the dead? If they're already dead, shouldn't we take them before they die?
Yeah, I think ideally the best circumstances is that you would take them before they die, and then you would essentially euthanize them. So like there's a lot of, actually in Europe, a lot of people see the greatest potential for cryonics as being in countries where euthanasia is legal, because you can kind of freeze them at the same time as euthanizing them. So yeah, that's definitely, but unfortunately, like the law is a huge factor here. After you're dead, then you can, these people have all signed over their bodies for medical research, is what it's called, to the cryonics companies. But these cryonics companies are not sort of allowed, obviously, to euthanize people. So the person would have to kind of do that themselves, but it would be so murky, it's so legally dodgy, I don't think it would happen. In the book, there's a story about a woman, Dora Kent, who was brought into the cryonics facility as she was dying. And because they didn't have a doctor present to declare her dead before they worked on her, and they decapitated her and froze her head, that caused massive legal problems. They got raided by the coroner's office. It's sort of the thing that cryonicists don't want to say, because obviously as soon as they say it, it's a huge public relations disaster. As soon as they say we need to kill you and then freeze you, people get really creeped out, even more so than normal cryonics. But that's definitely the best way of doing it.
I could imagine there's some place underground. I don't know if it would be underground or what this would be, but I could imagine an underground facility filled with thousands of heads, frozen heads just waiting to be reanimated. That's creepy, in my opinion. It reminds me of something like Futurama. Have you ever seen that cartoon?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And then they bring them back, and they're on these little floating devices. They're just heads floating around all over the place.
if you think a bit about it like a sort of, if you like play along with it and imagine this is actually possible. So there's loads of these, a lot of heads that are used to sort of, there are a lot of heads stored all over the world right now. I mean, there's probably less than 1,000, but there are heads stored and frozen. If you imagine that them getting reanimated, that's kind of a crazy thought for these people. Like, imagine being that person and all of a sudden being reanimated in a future world. First things first, you need a body of some kind, otherwise you're just a head. Secondly, like you've lost a lot of agency over yourself. Like, there's so much like scope for people to abuse you in some way, to take your head and use it, download your consciousness, to put you in a virtual reality, to put you to work in some way, and you would be technically dead. So I don't know if you even have any rights. And then there's the obvious thing of like, you'd be in a future, you'd have no connection to that world. You wouldn't know anyone, you wouldn't know what was going on. You'd be essentially a refugee from the past. The more you think about it, the more creepy it gets, really. But I mean, that's maybe just me being a pessimist, though. Obviously, the cryonicists will say, by the time we've got this technology, the world will be great, and there'll be lots of things to help. But certainly, you'd need a lot of therapy when you were reanimated.
Prior to our show today, I was watching a few videos with Aubrey de Grey. People were asking him questions. If somebody would ask him a question that he did not approve of, I haven't spoken with him. I don't know if this is truly the way he is or not, but it seemed like he went on the attack. Even if it was an innocent question that anybody should be asking, he would go on the attack.
Yeah.
Is that something that you experienced?
Not personally, but I did speak to Aubrey de Grey, and I didn't experience that personally, but he is very much on the sort of militant side of things. So he believes that we need to fight aging and we need to stop aging. And he believes in doing that in any way possible. So if you're against him, then you're just in his way. When I spoke to him, I was into his book, it's obviously advantageous for him to communicate his ideas, and he tolerated all my questions because, it's getting his ideas across in a book. But I think when it comes to like sort of, I've seen this happen in sort of presentations where he has no time for certain questions anymore. And I get it because he's asked the same questions a lot, but he just believes that, some questions are just not worth answering anymore, such as what if the world becomes too overpopulated because nobody dies anymore?
Yes.
And he believes that's sort of ridiculous because he thinks that we'll have solved a lot of energy resource problems by the time we do this. And it works on some people and it puts other people off, I think, that very militant approach. Like, I will do anything I can. And if you listen to Aubrey and if you look at his image as well, he talks in a very specific way, almost like a member of the British sort of aristocrat. And he has this, this long Rasputin type beard. And I think Aubrey's image and the way he talks and the way he addresses some of those questions are very sort of carefully fine-tuned, because what Aubrey believes more than anything is that this issue needs to have more attention paid to it. So he's obviously a very clever guy, and yeah, he doesn't really suffer fools, I guess, in his eyes, but he wants to end aging any way he can do it.
Yes. From what I have seen, he's a highly intelligent individual. He's passionate about what he believes in, but he needs to have a little bit of humility, a little bit of understanding of other people. It's not just about him. It's not just about his beliefs. He needs to be more forthcoming and more welcoming of other perspectives as well, and that's how you progress what he wants to have happen, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. He's become sort of the face of this whole movement, anti-aging, and there are people that like him, there are people that don't. He also had, unfortunately, a sort of Me Too moment recently, where he had some accusations of improper emails he sent to other people in the field. So that really damaged his reputation. But it's always dangerous to put someone as the face of your industry, because especially someone so sort of, I guess over here we'd call him sort of Marmite. You either love him or you hate him. He's that type of person, and so someone that divisive is always going to be a risky person to head up your movement. But he's got so much support within the anti-aging industry. People love him.
Yes. One of the things, I actually wrote it down, one of the things he had said, he was talking about restoring and maintaining the structure and composition of any machine and keeping it functioning as though it were much newer than what it actually was. He was talking about an automobile at that point, but he's also talking about the human body, that if we were to maintain it, if we were to have restorative methods, such as, what was it here? Stem cell therapy in a form of restoration, that we could actually make our bodies much newer than what they currently are. We could go back 20 years, something along those lines.
Yeah, so he uses that analogy a lot. That basically, the human body is like a car essentially, and all you need to do is just maintain the parts, and when something breaks down, we'll just replace it, and we can also regenerate it through technologies like stem cell therapies. I think the consensus amongst the aging researchers is that it's a sort of vast oversimplification of how the human body works. It sounds great, and it's a great soundbite, and people love that when he says it because it makes it sound so easy. But like, we're not car parts, obviously. We're not cars. We don't even understand some of the parts inside us, truly. It's not so simple to regenerate. You can regenerate, but you can also cause cancer. You can do bad things at the same time as regenerating. There's huge potential in things like stem cell therapies. They could be absolute miracle cures for diseases and do amazing things. And they already have done some amazing things with stem cell therapies. But it's still too premature to say that you could just simply regenerate your body and make yourself live 20 years longer, or 40 years longer, or 60 years longer.
But currently, we do have ways to replace organs with such as lungs, pig lungs. I think maybe even pig hearts can be replaced inside of a human body. I don't think we can do the brain just yet, but there's a lot of different things that we can do to make a person better than what they currently are, especially if they are diseased. Take organs from one to another. I mean, we do that through other means as well. But it really does seem like we are able to, I don't know, take parts from one car, put it in another car, and make it function like new almost.
Yeah, I mean, that technology will get even better when we can grow our own organs that are exactly sort of replicas. So yeah, it is possible, but it's much more complex. You can't, if you have cancer all over your body, you can't replace, every single thing. And also, if you think about aging as a sort of gradual degeneration, so essentially we're breaking down, all our cells all over our body are getting older, everything is not working as well, we've got inflammation all over us. It's a full body thing. So yeah, you could switch out a few parts, but it doesn't stop the overall degeneration of the body, if that makes sense.
Yes.
It would be, and there's great potential, and we could save so many lives, and people could live longer and healthier for longer by doing this. But you couldn't do it indefinitely because aging is a full body process, and there's so many things going at the same time. If you were to defeat aging, there's no way it would be sort of one silver bullet solution. You have to stop so many processes and slow down so many processes, and then maybe reverse so many processes. It's going to be an insanely complicated solution if you do that. That's not to say it's not possible, or some version of it's not possible, but it's definitely more complex than just like switching out body parts.
Now, another thing that you have written about, and it has been in the news, it's been in scientific magazines, it's about infusions, transfusions of younger blood, youthful blood into the elderly or people who are older. And there has been some evidence, in mice at the very least, that it has helped to a degree, right?
Yeah. So there is evidence to suggest that this could work.
It's almost like a vampire.
Yeah, essentially, yeah, you'd be a real-life vampire. A lot of these things come with a huge caveat. So when we say like they've worked in mice, they haven't made the mice necessarily live longer. So like nothing we've done has improved the life expectancy of a mouse unless it's already diseased. But it has improved certain biomarkers within the mouse. And then the other huge caveat is when we do things with mice or with fruit flies or anything, they're vastly different from the human body. So I think it's really easy to get carried away, I think, and that's partly one of the problems of the Immortalist crowd, is that they see these studies on mice and on fruit flies and on certain types of worms and things, and they believe that, okay, well, that's going to work on a human, whereas there's still a long way to go to get something to work on a human after it works on a mouse. And also there is obviously the ethical concerns of doing that, like taking presumably donated blood and sort of putting it in you. It's a strange thing, but yeah, weirdly it has promise. As much as that makes people uncomfortable, it does have some promise.
And there's also been, now this is not something that you yourself have covered as far as I know, but there have also been serial killers out there who have attacked youthful people and would drain them of their blood. Essentially, we are talking about people who believe that they are vampires, I guess, and would consume that blood to revitalize themselves. That goes into that movement in a way, and it makes me wonder, are there immortalist cult? I don't know if you want to call them cults or not. I'll call them a cult, some of them at the very least. If there are certain groups out there who might kidnap youthful people, have them against their will, and drain them of their blood.
Not that I've heard of, definitely.
And they wouldn't tell you.
They wouldn't tell me. I would be the last person they tell. But certainly, like, they do struggle with this image. But I have to say, every Immortalist I met was a very nice person, and they were very optimistic. I never got any vampire vibes from them. And they were all very welcoming. And also they were very optimistic for the human life. And I think a lot of them believe that this is something we all have to do together. As you know, they want to help everyone in the world, not just themselves, a lot of them. But that's kind of the danger, isn't it, with these things, is that someone's always going to take a crazy angle on it. But I think that happens with any sort of cutting edge science or any new idea. Someone's always going to take it and do something crazy. And I think that, unfortunately, that's just inevitable. But obviously, I don't think just drinking someone's blood works. I think you do have to sort of cycle it in a certain way.
Yeah.
So definitely wouldn't encourage.
It was one of those things I was wondering, because we know to the far extents that certain individuals have gone to in the past, at the very beginning of the movements, and the failures that they've achieved. I guess they didn't achieve the failures. The failures happened to them, fell in their laps. What has the successes been? We know what the failures have been, and they've been a lot of failures over the years, but have there been successes?
There's been successes, definitely. There have been sort of incremental successes. None of it is as fast as the people involved want it to be, but there have been things that have happened. You know, there's been breakthroughs that people have been really excited about, and some of those are in gene therapies, some of those are in gene editing, some of those are in stem cell therapies. So there was definitely and some of the work that Aubrey degraded was some of the work he did was extremely interesting. So one of the fields which is really promising for anyone into this is senescent cells. So essentially senolytics. The senescent cells, essentially when a cell sort of reaches the end of its life, it becomes a senescent cell, which is essentially a zombie cell. It's just dead, and it stays in the body, but it's dead. It's not doing anything. As these accumulate as you get older. A lot of researchers thought, okay, we're just going to get rid of these senescent cells and we'll slow down the aging process or reverse the aging process. It turned out the senescent cells also had anti-cancer properties, so it wasn't that simple. But I think the latest research is saying that these senescent cells, they secrete things after they become senescent. When they become zombie cells, they secrete these proteins which are really damaging to all the organs and tissue around them. So if there was a way of turning off that secretion, then that would definitely be an area where you would slow down aging or allow the body to regenerate slightly. So that is a really promising area, and where people put a lot of faith. And some people like biohackers and immortalists are already trying to take some of the drugs that have promise in that area.
There's another area of this that I've actually touched on many times with Michio Kaku, Brian Greene, and other people, and that is the probability of uploading your consciousness to a system of some kind, making a digital duplicate of who you are. And I know that's something that you also touched on. What have you learned about the science behind digital consciousness And how far into the future are we looking at?
Yeah, so it's really tricky. It's really hard, as you can imagine. First of all, we have to really understand the brain. We're not even able to properly map the human brain, so we haven't reverse engineered the human brain yet. I think that's step one. Second, you really need to establish what makes us us. So if you're going to upload something to to a virtual environment, to a computer, what do you actually upload? Do you upload the memories and where are they stored in the brain? Do you upload consciousness, whatever that is? How much does our sort of gut bacteria affect who we are, for example? That's another question. It's really hard to decide what to upload, and what version of that person do you upload. So I guess the way that some people believe it will happen is that you'll be able to scan the brain essentially and take everything off it, but only if the brain is preserved in a certain way. So there is work being done sort of to preserve brains, not to reanimate them, just to preserve them so the memories and everything is intact in them. So you can then, it's almost like you're keeping a library of people. And then in the future, possibly we could take that, if there's some way of taking that information, of scanning that information, of downloading that information, and then you could put it into a virtual environment and make it person, I guess. So we're really at the stage now where there are people that are storing brains in that way, but they're doing it in the hope that it's useful in the future, rather than knowing it will definitely be useful in the future. So in the same way that we certain groups started saving the genomes of animals decades ago, and everyone thought it was ridiculous, but now obviously they're really important things to have. Other people are doing even more sort of proactive things personally. So there's people that record themselves, record their conversations, they record everything about themselves. They're constantly being recorded, and they keep those recordings in the hope that they could be used to sort of make a digital avatar after they died, or a digital version of themselves. It's a massive long shot again, and there's some really deep philosophical questions, like which version of you do you want to be uploaded to a computer? Do you want the version of you when you're 85 on your deathbed, or do you want the version when you're 19 or something in between? There's really questions of what makes you are key to that. And then also the question of consciousness: is it really you if you've died, but your consciousness has been sort of re-sparked? Is it still you? People think that continuity of consciousness is key to defining sort of living for forever or living for longer. So yeah, it's really, really interesting. I'd sort of encourage anyone to read everything out there about it, because it's fascinating. If you're like me and you love the sci-fi films that come out about this pretty consistently, then it's always a really great sort of area to do a big deep dive in, and sort of get lost in it, because some of the things really surprise you, and some of the questions it brings up really surprise you.
Yes. There was a movie many years ago, I forgot exactly what year it was. I think it was called The Island, where they were making clones of people. It was essentially a huge island of clones. They did not realize they were clones. Essentially, it was like a medical facility. The rich people would give off their genetics, and the clones were being made. When they get to a certain age, the original person would want their body, their younger body, so they would replace the brain.
Yeah, I haven't seen that film. Yeah, but it's I think I've seen something similar. Yeah, it's
I wonder if that would be feasible, if that was something that we could do. I don't think it's happened yet, that we can replace the human brain from one body and put it into another. That's another thing to look into, I guess.
Yeah, brain transplants are, I wouldn't say it would be that far away. It's whether they'd actually work once they were in there, and whether that would still be you is the other question.
True.
Because we don't really know where consciousness comes from, and how much of our sort of the rest of our bodies affect who we are.
Exactly. Who are we? Who is Peter Ward? Who is Bob Bain? I don't know. Are we the hardware, or are we software? The brain's the hardware, but what about the software?
Exactly. Yeah, that's the question. And we like to, even the hardware though, if you think about the body replenishes its cells, every so many years. So we're actually nothing like 20 years ago. The person that we were physically has changed almost completely since then. So it's that sort of question of, what makes you you is a really essential part of that, I think, and it's a really interesting sort of philosophical exercise to get into.
What is your belief? I don't know if this is something that you've looked into or not, but theoretical physicists have come out and they believe that we are all living in a holographic illusion, that none of this is real. And if none of this is real, what's the point of reaching for immortality when we're already immortal? We're going to live forever anyway.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, so in terms of my view on it, I think it's absolutely impossible to disprove. So I think it's a complete possibility. I try not to think about it too often because it messes with your head. But I think I mean, if there were any hint that that were true, obviously immortality would be completely pointless. Living longer would be completely pointless. But then I guess sort of a lot of things we do would lack a purpose all of a sudden. But yeah, I mean, a lot of things make me think we're living in some kind of computer program. You know, a lot of the events of the past 5 years made me think that someone's maybe pulling some prank on us. So it would absolutely not surprise me if there. I mean, I know that people like Elon Musk, who I think is convinced that we're living in some kind of simulation. So yeah, I think there's no way of proving it or disproving it, but would we want to, I guess, is the question. Are we just happy of being ignorant about that if it is true? Which I think we probably are.
Have you ever heard of the Mandela effect?
No.
No. It goes back to, I don't know specifically what year. It might have been the 80s. There were reports that many people had already believed that Nelson Mandela died in prison. Now, these were documented cases. Essentially, the Mandela effect is the belief that another dimensional layer or whatever of life, somehow the frequencies merge with ours and we get signals from another multiverse, if you will.
Yeah.
Now, I myself have had these types of experiences. I had it with my wife once, and it was with an American journalist. His name was, what was his name? Andy Rooney. That was his name. That Andy Rooney had died. It was all over the news, and yet we kept seeing new reports by him for years. And we just looked at each other. Didn't he die? He must have just recorded all these prior to dying. That's what we thought. And then another report that Andy Rooney had died again. The same guy died twice. And that is essentially what the Mandela effect is. It's something that's happened. I guess you could say it's deja vu as well. And it makes me wonder if we truly are living in a holographic universe, or perhaps there are multiverses surrounding us.
Yeah.
It's weird.
It's weird. Yeah, it's weird when you think about it, because I mean, one of the things that someone mentioned was in my research was a thing called, I think you call it quantum immortality, which essentially means I think the general point of it is that we do live forever, because in every different reality, we make a different choice, which doesn't lead to our death. And so in some reality, we figure out how to do cryonics. If there's multiple universes, and in each one is going or branching on so many different directions, and in one of these universes, humans crack immortality. They figure out how to do it. So yeah, that's an interesting concept as well. That maybe we'll be dead here, but in a different universe, we'll be living on. Again, that sort of stretches the definition of immortality, because if it's a version of you in a different universe, it's not your own consciousness which is going on.
Exactly. Well, Peter, what has been some of the weirdest stuff that you have actually experienced while doing your reporting? Because you've been in Dubai, you've worked for Al Jazeera. I mean, you've done all sorts of things. What have been some of the weirdest experiences of your life as a journalist? Has there been anything that's been really weird that you're like, I can't believe that happened?
That's a good question. I'm trying to think of some things. I mean, I had a great trip out to Russia in November that was pretty weird. Just felt like I was in a dystopian future. It was obviously prior to the war. And it was, I went out there to to research about cryonics, and I wanted to see about this old Russian prophet who said, old Russian philosopher who said that we'd all live forever and that also we'd bring back everyone else to life as well. So that was where I had a moment just walking into the subway, the metro in Russia, in Moscow. You know, it's freezing outside, but everyone was wearing masks in the subway, and the police sort of checking bags and telling you to put your mask on. And, you know, there was this threat of war in the air, and it just felt like I'd just fallen straight into a sort of, you know, one of these dystopian sci-fi movies. And it was just, it wasn't a good one. It was grim. That was definitely a feeling. It was like, you know, am I actually in a movie right now? This is a bizarre reality that we live in, where we have this pandemic, we have wars going on, we have all these sort of dystopian things happening in the news. It was definitely a sort of moment of realization of like, what is going on here? So I think, yeah, that is definitely a weird moment for me, just in the reporting of this book, just to see Russia at that point, like terrified of the pandemic and also on the brink of war, felt like something, you know, it was just a terrible moment in time. You think, it was just odd, just overall odd, just like I was in a video game or a film, really bizarre. Yeah, I'm not sure what other sort of odd thing. I mean, I've spoken to a lot of eccentric people who tell me things a lot of the time. I spoke to a guy who believed that he was sent a double rainbow as a message to fix the US healthcare system. And he spent a huge amount of money trying to market this idea. That was a strange moment, definitely. And he took me outside and showed me his number plate, which said rainbow on it. He'd gone all in on it, and you know, maybe he was right. I don't know. I'm not the person to judge, but it was definitely a moment where I was thinking, this is a strange reality. Yeah. So I think I meet all types of people, and they usually have far more interesting and weird lives than I do.
Yes.
So I guess I'm mainly just living precariously through them.
I'll tell you, the weirdest person I ever met, when I started doing this show in 2013, I had a guy reach out to me, and he wanted to discuss something that he had done in the 1970s. And before I tell you what he claimed he did, I actually had to research this. I found newspaper articles about him, and he had he claimed this, he had a consensual affair, sexual relationship with a dolphin.
Wow.
With a dolphin.
The dolphin.
He wasn't making this up. It was real. It was in the newspapers. He worked at, it was almost like the SeaWorld or whatever, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
It was something similar.
Like an off-brand SeaWorld.
Yeah. He claimed they had fallen in love with each other, and he actually had intercourse with a dolphin.
Yeah.
I can't believe that.
How do you react to that? It's
just, okay. Yeah. I think the show's over. I'm not going to talk with you anymore. That's it. That was the weirdest person I ever spoke with.
Yeah. Yeah. I have never had that. That tops mine, definitely. But yeah.
Imagine writing a book about that.
Yeah, that would be quite a book. I can see the movie rights being brought up straight away.
Before we go, I actually pulled up, what is it called? Alcor? I pulled up their website.
Yeah.
They claim they currently have 190 patients. I guess that is the people they have frozen.
Yeah.
And they have 1,412 members, and they've been serving the community for 50 years. 1,400 plus members. That's people who have signed up but are not frozen yet, correct?
Yeah, that's right. So they've signed up and they've paid their money, or they've got a life insurance plan which will pay out when they die to Alcor, and they're ready to be frozen.
For them to be around as long as they have, 50 years, 190 patients, that doesn't sound like a lot, does it?
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest problems with cryonics. It's just not taken off in the way anyone would hope it would. The numbers are still really, really low. And one of the 190 is the guy who Bob Nelson froze, the first ever person froze. There was patients aren't even necessarily frozen by Alcor. Some of them are the ones that they took from other companies. So yeah, that's the biggest. If you point to any proof that this isn't going to work, I think your your biggest point of evidence would be that nobody's doing it and nobody's taking it up. So unless they up those numbers, it's not going to work anyway, because they're not going to be in a financial position to keep these bodies for long enough as they need.
Have you been able to tour any of these facilities?
So I haven't toured Alcor. The pandemic meant I couldn't go out there and do it. I did tour the one in Russia, Cryo's. That was an experience. It's essentially just a warehouse in the middle of just outside Moscow.
Do you actually see the bodies, the frozen bodies?
No, they wouldn't let me see the bodies. But so the ones in Moscow, I don't know if they do the same in Alcor, but they're these huge sort of white tanks, and they're sort of feel kind of cold to the touch on the outside, but they're filled with liquid nitrogen. But the bodies inside are hung upside down. And the idea of that is that if the liquid nitrogen falls away, sort of starts leaking, or they don't top it up in time, then the last thing to defrost will be the heads, because they're at the bottom. So they're sort of hung upside down like sort of bats in this sort of container, this cylinder, gigantic cylinder. And so, yeah, I'm kind of glad they didn't open it up and show me. But yeah, I was definitely curious. I was, curiosity just wants you to see like what is inside and what's going on in there.
For some reason, I was imagining these chambers, these containers to be white, large white, whatever, but that the human head would have a window so you can actually see into it. That's something I just imagined.
Yeah, that's how they're usually portrayed, in TV and film, anything like this. But they don't have them, unfortunately. Well, I guess fortunately in some cases, unfortunately in others. But yeah, because obviously there's two types. There's the full body and then there's the heads. So the heads are kept in a smaller container. But the full body ones are kept in these gigantic sort of vats.
I guess with the heads, you can go bowling with those, couldn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, as long as you put them back in the liquid nitrogen afterwards.
They're not going to complain about it.
Yeah, exactly. It's no, it's weird. It's weird in that, like, you think, I don't know, they obviously see them as these like sacred things. They see them as people who are going to be living again. So they do supposedly take extremely good care of them. I'm sure they do, but
I've actually been looking at this. There are rumors that I had always heard Walt Disney had been frozen, either his whole body or his head, and that he's actually somewhere in Florida, I believe it is. And then there are also reports that he was cremated. I don't know what to believe.
Yeah, so someone actually mentioned this off the record to me, someone in cryonics, and they said back in the day, someone in Alcor had a phone call from somebody who supposedly worked at Disney. It wasn't Walt Disney himself, or someone in cryonics back then. I can't remember exactly. And there was a phone call essentially, and all the rumor came from that one phone call, because they never followed up on it, and it was never done by any company that's around now. So either he did it himself, which I guess is possible, and had it arranged himself and did it in Florida, or it's just an urban myth. They really strictly, like, keep everything confidential in terms of who they've got as patients, who they've got frozen. So you wouldn't really know actually if Walt Disney was there. But there was some really funny, I did read some really funny rumors around it, saying that in the movie Frozen, the kids movie Frozen, so apparently they called it Frozen, so when you search Walt Disney Frozen or Disney's Frozen, the movie comes up and not and not the rumors that his head is frozen.
Yes. Have you ever seen the animated TV series? It's called Family Guy.
Yes, yeah.
Yes, they actually had an episode that was supposed to have been loosely based on the Walt Disney story. And this guy was, let's just say it was Walt Disney, and there was a statue of him in the middle of the amusement park.
Yeah.
He was in the statue, frozen for a long time. He came back, and he broke out of the statue.
Yeah.
I mean, could you imagine that a statue could be a cryogenic chamber, and Walt Disney is inside of his statue somewhere, being frozen until a time when he's like, nope, I've had enough. Let's break out of here.
I mean, that would be quite a show for Disney, I think.
That would be a little scary for the family park, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think any of the kids present will be going back to Disneyland anytime soon. It's terrifying.
Well, Peter, I definitely appreciate the time that you spent with us this evening. Before you go, is there anything you would like to share with the audience, your website, anything that you might have coming up, anything at all?
I guess mostly the book. So the book is The Price of Immortality, The Race to Live Forever, and that's out very soon. It's available everywhere. You can get it on ebook. There's an audiobook version as well if you prefer to listen to books. Unfortunately, I'm not the narrator, so you don't get my mumbling all the way through the audio tape. Yeah, so mainly the book. I'm on Twitter. If anybody wants to follow me, just search Peter Ward Journo. If you read the book and have any comments, then that's where to get in touch with me.
And again, the book is The Price of Immortality, The Race to Live Forever, and I will create a short link for everyone. They can go to cwb.fm/Ward. It's always a pleasure to speak with people such as yourself from different perspectives, different worldviews, and, like I said, I've spoken with Michio Kaku, Brian Greene. I've spoken with people from the world of Scientology, former cult members. And it's just doing a podcast like this has really helped me reach outside of my small little box. I was born and raised here in Tennessee, so I was just a southern little hick, I guess you could say. And I didn't know anything else. I was just a hillbilly. And now I've spoken with people such as yourself that I never would have been able to before. And I definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, well, it's my pleasure, honestly. It's great to talk. Yeah, I'm always happy to talk about my book, and I'm sure there'll be other articles and maybe another book in the future. So I'd love to come back on the show if you'll have me.
Oh, I'll have you anytime you want to come on. There was a time when I used to be heavily scripted. I mean, that's something that a lot of podcasters do. You get on here, and especially for someone like me, because I was always shy. I don't want to be in front of a camera. I don't want to talk to people. I'm still that way. But get me in front of a microphone, you can't shut me up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's been awesome, and I feel I'm the same way. I have to be sort of teased out of my shell to get me talking. But thanks for your questions that done exactly that. So it's been great.
Before we go, someone once said to me, they don't know if they would actually live forever because they're seeing the way society is today. It's not the way that they remember it being. People are more, I don't know if you want to say they're more intolerant of other people's perspectives and views, such as if you don't, I'm not saying anything bad about anybody. Let's just say if you're from the 1950s and you're not the type of person who understands transgenderism, that's outside of your perspective. And you say to someone, I respect you, I like you, but I do not accept your lifestyle choices or whatever. And then that person attacks the elderly person or whatever. They are saying that they don't know if they would want to extend their life because already it's so unlike anything that they remember being brought up in.
Yeah, I'd say that's the great thing about life. I think that's why immortality is ultimately not the best idea, because change is what makes everything interesting. It's one of the things that we push back a lot against, change, but ultimately change is good. Change is what makes life great. And even if those changes are for the worse sometimes, that's you have to have the lows, have the highs, and I think the best thing you can do is just accept it. That one day you're going to die, and that I'm not going to let the little things get to me, and I'm just going to enjoy my life and accept whatever changes come around me and adapt, which I think is ultimately humanity's greatest ability, is to adapt. I think that's why we are, the predominant species on the planet, that we can adapt to anything. And so we do that usually over thousands of years, but to do it over a decade or so is a lot easier. So yeah, I would say, it's a tricky question, but who knows what the future would be? The future could go the other way, and it could be absolutely awful. It could be starving people. It could be underwater. Which is why I think you've just got to. It sounds really corny, but just live in the moment and enjoy the time you have. And just go with it.
That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to live in the moment. I do not believe I'd want to live for another 100 years. I don't know if I'd want to live 50 years past my natural expiration date, if I can live to be 80 years of age, if I die when I'm 80 or 80 plus, hey, I lived my life. That's what matters. Live your life in the here and now. Don't worry about 50, 60, 70 years. Don't worry about tomorrow. Worry about today. Live your life. A lot of people, that's something that I've noticed. A lot of people just don't live their lives anymore. They are so sick and tired because they are wondering about everything, but they're not living.
Yeah, it's easy to overcomplicate things. I think if you live your life and then go by the very, very basic rule of I want to, leave the world a little bit better than when I entered it, then I think you can't go too wrong, basically.
Exactly. And that takes, I promise I will end this soon, but that takes me to one more thing. If the ability to live past our natural expiration date, as I call it, was something that was available in the 1700s, we would still have people in today's age here in the United States and elsewhere who were strong proponents of slavery. We would have people, slave owners, who would still be, I guess, in the mentality that African Americans are our slaves. We're not going to give them up. And giving immortality to certain people might not be the best plan for humanity.
Yeah. And if you think about how it would affect politics, you'd have all these voters who were stuck in very, very entrenched in their own views. So it's everywhere you look at it, there's loads of things that you would be really worried about. So I think, politics in particular would be a really dangerous thing to have people living. Even if people start living till they're 200, those people would most likely be the wealthiest people who are allowed to live to 200, who had the means to achieve that first. They would accumulate more wealth, and what would that do for the rest of the world? And then obviously you'd have the voting issues. They would vote to keep their own interests, to keep themselves alive, to keep themselves wealthy. It would have huge knock-on effects all the way along. So again, it just goes back to enjoy your life and don't get greedy, I guess.
Yeah. That is something that we've actually seen here in the United States, because we don't have term limits for the House or Senate at the Capitol level. So we have people who have been there since they were in their 30s or 40s, and now they're in their 80s and 90s. And they are so in the system, and they have the power, they don't ever want to change it. A lot of us, we would like to see term limits, that you can't continually be in the Senate or the House, the Senate, etc., for an eternity until the day you die. There should be term limits. There should be age limits, because, in my opinion, I'm not speaking for anybody else, in my opinion, the elderly, the senior citizens, should not be leading the nation into the future for the United States or even in England. I mean, it's up to the young blood for the future of our democracy.
Absolutely. I'm 100% in agreement there. I think it's great if you saw I don't know if you saw the hearings with Facebook and
oh yes,
other technology companies, and it's just embarrassing when you've got these old representatives and senators who clearly just don't understand how their phone works, and they're trying to ask a question about, why do you have this algorithm when I search, and he's asking it to the Facebook guy, not the Google guy. It just underlines the point that term limits, very good idea.
And then you have people here in the state of Tennessee at the Capitol level where they are attacking education because they don't like particular things being taught, such as the Holocaust. They don't appreciate the Holocaust being discussed. They don't appreciate a lot of other things that goes against their perspectives, I guess you could say. If it doesn't go with their perspective, they want to shoot it down. They want to bury it. That's something that I just don't like about people being in power beyond their time.
Yeah, it goes back to Plato, right? Of people in power should be, they shouldn't want power. They should reluctantly accept power. And when you get people that are career politicians, it's scary. That's a career that's been essentially your whole life has been either clinging to power or attaining power. So it's just not good. But yeah, and it would get worse if people got older. So
Well, Peter, I will let you go. I've said this 20 different times. I apologize for that, but you're someone I definitely appreciate. I actually like speaking with. I mean,
oh, good. Yeah, I mean, yeah, this is a great interview. I've done a few of these, and so it's nice to have one that's more of like a conversation, not sort of like rigid.
that is something that I always try to aim for, especially these last few years. A conversation is the best way to do it, in my opinion. I don't want to be overly scripted. I've done that before, and I just sounded like a damn robot.
Yeah,
Because I would have my questions here. I would write them out and read them almost verbatim.
yeah,
And people were saying, you sound like a robot. That's because I'm reading, folks. And now I just don't, I mean, I'm not going to say I don't care, but I believe that the best conversation is an actual conversation that can lead us from point A to point Z in any other direction. Whatever you say, if it does something to my brain, whether it gives me a zing, a ping, or a fart, a brain fart, like, oh, what am I going to say here? It's real. That's what I want to present to people. I'm a real person. You're a real person. None of this is fake. This conversation is 100% real.
yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, have a good evening.
Yeah, you have a great rest of the day, and I hope the weather doesn't get too bad.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Cheers.
Cheers. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was Peter Ward. And again, his book is The Price of Immortality, The Race to Live Forever. Well, folks, after listening to this program, what would you do? Would you choose to freeze yourself? Would you freeze your body? Would you have your head removed and frozen? Would you try and have your consciousness digitized? How would you do this? How would you try to extend your life? Would you at all? Well, until the next time we come back together again, I bid you all a kind farewell.